artist all my life. Grew up in Minneapolis, as you heard. I went to Saturday art classes at the Walker Art Center. Went to summer school at the Minneapolis College of Art and Design, and majored in art at Lawrence University. After Bill and I got married, here's Bill, we lived in Honolulu for a year, where I painted the local scene and had my first show. We moved to Boston for 8 years. I worked at the MIT library while Bill was in graduate school at Harvard. At lunchtime, I could sail one of the tech dinghies. This is the view to Boston from the MIT boathouse. Anybody that's been to Boston recently knows that the skyline doesn't look anything like that anymore. I continue to paint in my spare time. Buildings of Harvard on the left and Beacon Hill on the right, and the seacoast. When we moved here in 1964, Pittsburgh didn't look like any of those places. And I thought, what am I going to paint? And by then, I was working in acrylic as well as watercolor. And I began including newspaper collage to add texture to the often gritty scenes. These are 2 early paintings of hillsides along Washington Boulevard. All these houses are now gone. In 1966, East Liberty homes were being torn down for big housing projects. Projects which have now been demolished and replaced by townhouses. Downtown has changed a lot. This is one of my first paintings from the Allegheny riverbank in 1969, without most of the familiar skyscrapers. 14 years later, you can see Mellon Bank in scaffolding behind the USX Tower. This painting is owned by the Rivers Club. Zubik's fleet was rusting along the banks of the Allegheny near 16th Street in 1991. First side, on the Mon, is an area of historic buildings. My 1982 painting was done to include the law office of Stone Cipher, Cunningham, Beard, and Schmidt. It's the building with the arches. PPG Place was being built behind it. On the right, 33 years later, you see all the PPG buildings in the left and part of the new Reed Smith building on the right. The Beard Law Office is now hidden behind a big condominium. The Strip District has been fun to paint. This part of Penn Avenue hasn't changed too much between '84 and 2014. The red brick candy store is still there in both paintings, although a Woolies sign has replaced the ad for Cool cigarettes. A McDonald's now fills the parking lot beyond the candy store. And the church is there, but it's now a nightclub. The candy store was torn down this year, but if you drive by, you still see a Woolies sign. Remember the East Street Valley before I-279 was built? It was wonderful to paint. In 1972, one of the old buildings about to be demolished, one of the last ones before they built the I-279 expressway. In 1997, I had the chance to take photos from One Oxford Center. This painting, Pittsburgh Geometry, looks down on Grant Street. Notice the Civic Arena in the distance. These are 2 views of downtown from the Arlington neighborhood on the south side. In the 1994 painting, you can see the Three Rivers Stadium in the distance. Otherwise, downtown wasn't that different in 2014. In this 2014 painting, you can see Heinz Field in the distance. Below Mount Washington, the Duquesne Incline was an early subject. Newspaper collage emphasizes its rundown condition in 1976. In 2014, it's nicely restored, and the old factory behind it is gone. This is a view of the Hill District in 1984 from the Washington Plaza apartment of Friends. Much of this area has now been redeveloped. Here's some of the new redeveloped 2010 paintings. Wiley Street. It's lined with new townhouses. And a last view of the Civic Arena. It's called The End of the Road. It's now on display in Mayor Peduto's office. Looking down Fifth Avenue to downtown in 1985, on the left, and the same view in 2014. You can see that the houses on the left are pretty much the same. On the right, all of them have been torn down except the one white one with the cornice. And then beyond is the new Console Hockey Center, or the PPG Paint Arena. I've loved finding my way around all the hilly neighborhoods. I have drawers full of photos. A favorite site is St. John's Cemetery on Spring Hill on the north side. You look down over Troy Hill and then to downtown. Troy Hill in the foreground has hardly changed between the watercolor and the 2014 view. But there's lots of changes in the skyline beyond. Troy Hill is another favorite site. From across the Allegheny in 1992, the lovely domes of St. Nicholas Church rise over old factories and barges along the river. In 2014, the church and the old factories are gone, and there's only one abandoned barge. The houses along the top are pretty much the same. And notice the Troy Hill steps on the far right of the lower painting. This 2006 painting is the view from those Troy Hill steps with the church and downtown beyond. It was from the last show that I had at the Bird in the Hand Gallery in Sewickley, where I showed since 1972. That show was all about the steps of Pittsburgh. Rialto Street is a steep street going straight up from Route 28 at 31st Street. I've watched it change since 1971, when it was crowded with old houses. In the winter of 2014, it was closed for reconstruction, and the houses were all torn down. Here's Rialto Street from the 31st Street Bridge in 1978 on the left, and in 2014 when it reopened. These are two paintings from the Rialto Street looking downtown. On the left, the 1972 view was a junkyard. On the right, the Route 28 construction was going on in 2010, and there was lots of changes in the skyline. Two more views from 31st Street. On the left is Hers Island before it was redeveloped. On the right, the railroad bridge is now a bike and pedestrian path, and rowers love the back channel. Pittsburgh is full of wonderful old neighborhoods. Remember the old Bloomfield Bridge on the left? On the right, a view of Bloomfield from the bridge with the old St. Margaret's Hospital on the hill. On the left is another painting done from the old Bloomfield Bridge in 1979. And on the right is a painting of Polish Hill, 1988, I was there yesterday taking more pictures, or Sunday. It really hasn't changed. The Greenfield neighborhood is full of steep streets and splendid panoramas. The top painting is a 1992 watercolor and ink sketch of Greenfield Avenue from Forester Street. I returned to paint the scene in 2014, and the street is almost the same. Here are two steep neighborhoods in Greenfield, Forester Street on the left and Fraser Street on the right. Both are from 2014. And this is Greenfield Avenue in 1985, when the J&L Mill still loomed in the background. Here are two paintings of the north side, James Street, looking up the hill on the left, and Middle Street, looking down the hill on the right. The Middle Street painting is on the cover of a 2015 book by Bob Regan called Pittsburgh Steps. Here are two paintings of the south side from the hill, looking down over the flats, Southside Flats on the left, and looking down from Pius Street on 16th Street to Oakland on the right. The 2014 painting of the Smithfield Bridge was done from a photo I took on a ducky boat tour. Compare the new McArdle Bridge and roadway in the center of the painting behind the bridge to the 1993 painting below of that same area. McArdle Bridge has now been replaced, but the little houses are practically the same. Steel mills have made the landscape in and around Pittsburgh unique. They've been fascinating subjects for me. This is a classic view of J&L in downtown in 1972, all those chimneys and smoke. In 1982, the mills are still there on both sides of the river. But by 1992, the mills and the smoke are gone. There's a 1972 painting of the Mon Valley. Lots of smoke. I love to paint smoke. Here's a 1981 painting of the view of the J&L Mills in Oakland and across the river, looking up the Mon with the Hazelwood Coke Works in the distance. There's a closer view of the Coke Works at Hazelwood on the right. In the lower part of the lower painting, in the right-hand corner, you notice the barges along the riverbank. This is a 2013 painting of the former Hazelwood Coke Works. It's now been all cleared off. It's the site of the Almono development, which is going to include a track for testing Uber self-driving cars. But the coal barges are still parked there along the bank. Across the Mon is a train track and the steep hillsides of Hayes, where the Eagle's Nest is located. Going up the Mon Valley, the Clairton Coke Works was very smoky in 1976. It's still in operation. I didn't get back to do a new painting of it, but hopefully it's less smoky. Below, the Duquesne Mills stretched along the river. They were starting to be torn down in 1992. The Carey Furnace in Rankin stretched out along the river with two big stands of blast furnaces in 1988, just before it closed. Below is a close-up of one of the blast furnaces. I've loved painting the shapes and colors of blast furnaces. Luckily, a part of the Carey Furnace mill has been saved. Here's my 2013 painting called Quiet Mon. showing the remaining part of the mill set in vast brown fields. Blast furnaces were given women's names. This was called Dorothy 6. I did this big watercolor of the stages of Dorothy's destruction in 1992. It's called Dorothy Descending. This homestead view is called Post-Industrial Pittsburgh. It shows the remnants of the mill in the foreground, with the Cathedral of Learning rising up in the distance like a phoenix rising from the ashes. It won a purchase award at the Art of the State exhibit in Harrisburg that year, and is now in the Pennsylvania State Museum in Harrisburg. In 2014, you see that the cleared Homestead Mill area has become the big shopping center called the Waterfront at Homestead. The Carey Furnace is just across the Mon. The very first mill painting I ever did was this watercolor of Edgar Thompson in 1967. We had a boat then, and I saw this scene as we ventured up the Mon to Braddock. Most mills aren't too interesting from the outside anymore. Edgar Thompson is still impressive. The mill loomed over Braddock in my 1990 painting. Neither mill nor town have changed much in 2015. All the mill is now painted blue. And there's a golf course on top of the hill. I've watched the Shenango Mill on the island in the Ohio River for years as I would drive by on my way to the Bird in the Hand Gallery in Sewickley. In 1976, the blast furnaces were going strong. When I painted the last time in 2014, the blast furnace was gone, but it was still making coke. And I thought it was another survivor. But now it has closed too. I've painted a few other industries besides steel. In 1988, I had a commission from Consolidation Coal to do a painting for their 75th anniversary. Here, I'm ready to go in their Shoemaker mine, south of Pittsburgh. This is the painting I did from a photo I took as we were entering the tunnel on a little open train car. It's now hanging in my living room. Inside, I saw this exciting process of long wall mining. A big claw-like machine is stripping the coal seam and sending the coal out on a conveyor belt. Then, boxcars of the coal wind out through the narrow tunnels. These two paintings are now in the Penn State Mineral Sciences Museum in State College. Consol eventually chose this watercolor of the outside of another mine for their anniversary celebration. I think they thought the inside ones were a little claustrophobic. I'm sure many of you remember the Harmer mine just across the river. This is an early painting in '75. They later painted it green, and then they tore it down. I also went into a mine north of Pittsburgh in 1995 called the Rosebud Mine. Here I'm reclining on the train car which took us in. There's no headroom in the tunnels inside the mountain. This watercolor shows a miner on his knees. We all wore knee guards and crawled around to take pictures. It was hard to spend an hour there, let alone an 8-hour shift. In 1985, I was invited to do paintings in the PPG glass factory in Meadville. Here, the silica is being pushed into the furnace to make sheet glass. This painting is now hanging in the Heinz History Center at the entrance to their permanent exhibition on glass. I've been lucky to have had 9 visits inside steel mills. All the photos that I took in the mills continue to inspire my paintings. The first mill I entered was Washington Steel in 1983. Roger Blunt, the former Postmaster General, owned it then and was forming a collection of artwork. A friend got me the chance to tour the mill and do a painting for his collection. This is another painting from that visit called Rolling Mill. It's now in the collection of the Carnegie Museum of Art. Another Washington Steel painting called Mill Interior is now on loan in the mayor's office. A friend of mine was the chief metallurgist at Allegheny Ludlam, now part of Allegheny Technologies, and I had 2 great visits there. All sorts of fascinating processes were going on in their mills. On the left is a close-up of a ladle pouring a hot stream of metal, called charging the furnace. Bubbling Steel on the right is a big watercolor, now in the UPMC Rehab Hospital on the south side. 2 Allegheny Ludlam paintings from a series I did on the big ladles or buckets. On the left, bucket series number 3 shows the steel streaming out at the bottom of a huge bucket into ingot molds. And on the right, bucket series number 6, which is now in the Westmoreland Museum of American Art in Greensburg. In 1989, I was lucky to lead a workshop group going into the Edgar Thompson Works, where we actually had the chance to draw or paint for a couple of hours on a platform overlooking lots of fiery processes. This watercolor, Furnace Door, is also in the Westmoreland Museum. A friend got us permission for both of us to go into the Weirton, West Virginia mill in 1996. This is another in my series of paintings, which include the mill workers. You can see the worker on the left being dwarfed by the giant cloud of steam. In 1998, I got into the J&L Specialty Steel in Aliquippa, right before it closed. This watercolor, Mill Worker number 3, is in the United Steelworkers of America headquarters downtown. Another friend worked out a visit to Timken Steel in Canton, Ohio, on a very hot summer day in 2004. I call the painting Hot Work. It's hard to imagine how the workers lasted in there for an 8-hour shift. In 2011, I had the opportunity to photo in the huge mill in Ambridge, making pipe for Marcellus shale drilling. The main fiery process takes place when a hole is pierced through the center of a huge glowing pipe. This is a watercolor. The mill was operating 24 hours a day then. It's the glowing pipe that is being pierced to make the pipe. The mill was operating 24 hours a day then. I'm not sure how it's doing now. The most recent mill I toured was the EQS mill in Elwood City in 2013, which is making all kinds of specialty steel for airplane engines and gas drilling. This painting from that visit shows a giant forge making some kind of pipe casing. We've been residents at Longwood for over 4 years and suffered through the Halton Bridge construction, like all of you. I started taking photos of the barges and cranes when they began to arrive in April 2014. I thought I'd better photo the old bridge before it disappeared. And this is a painting I did from that photo, which shows the way it used to look. Now the construction has begun at this end. And this is the painting that I did from that area. I liked the bulky, colorful bulldozers and the almost abstract geometry of some of the equipment. In November 2014, the new green span is starting to arch out over the river. These two photos show the sunny bridge and the wonderful red towboat. I combined these two images in this painting. It seemed like a very long year as construction continued. Finally, the bridge was open in December 2015. I walked out on the new bridge to watch the old bridge deck be removed. And then the old bridge went down. It was demolished very quickly. So this painting combines memories of the old bridge, the construction period, and the bright new green Hulton Bridge. If you come to Longwood, you can see this painting over the fireplace in the big Commons living room. Thank you.